Some of you listening will already recognize this. This piece of music is called The Merry-Go-Round of Life, and it's the main theme to Studio Ghibli's animated motion picture, Howl's Moving Castle. I have a way I like to categorize music. I kind of divvy it up into a catalogue of experiences. The happy music all gets bundled together in one basket, the sadness in another, and after this process, what's left behind is everything that was indescribable. This song is one such example. It came on by chance in a shuffle. I'd not heard it in a small lifetime, and it was at this exact moment I realized it was a waltz.
But when he put his arm around her, pressed her to his breast, cavorted with her in the shameless, indecent, whirling dance of the Germans, and engaged in a familiarity that broke all the bounds of good breeding, then my silent misery turned into burning rage.
This is an excerpt from the 1771 German novel Geschichte der Frauleins von Stenheim by Sophie von La Roche, and I'm really hoping I pronounced that right. Some 500 to 600 years ago, the waltz was described as the godless weller, or spinner, with the word waltz literally deriving from the German word to revolve. Utilizing knowledge of weight and fall, dancers in their pairs would carousel around the ballroom. Waltzing is defined by its spin as much as its closeness, which in my mind makes it seem all the more appropriate that it would score the love story that is Howl's Moving Castle. Loosely based on the original novel of the same name written by Diane Wynne Jones and first published in 1986, the story is a fantasy romance. Our lovers feature a meek and quiet store manager, mutually enraptured by their polar opposite, a flighty, gung-ho wizard. Studio Ghibli's characters often have this magic about them. They're relatively inoffensive and easy to appreciate as kids, but there are gems of nuance buried beneath the surface. This story gives us Sophie and Howl. Sophie is defined by her stagnation. Her life is predictable, slow, and simple, and Howl is the opposite. He jumps in and out of whatever next big thing captivates him. He is a windswept individual. Both of these characters are getting by, but they're missing something, and the story would have you believe that it's each other. The first antagonist of the story is the Witch of the Wastes, a powerful but contemptuous sorceress who's been in love with Howl for years. She develops a petty, bitter envy over Sophie after seeing her spend time with Howl, and then, in an act of what can only be described as pure evil bitch energy, she hexes Sophie with a double whammy curse. For the first part of the curse, her body was morphed into that of an old, crusty-ass woman, and for the second part of the curse, her jaw would seize and clench if she dared to tell anybody about the curse. And the journey she undertakes to undo that curse is the whole movie. And while there's so much that I'd like to unpackage about this, the curse is the interesting part. The full mechanics of this curse are never explained. Like, we know that she's old and she can't tell people, but something strange happens throughout the course of the film. At different intervals, the grip that this curse has loosens. She will be over 80 years old at some points and then right back to normal at others, and the only connection that appears to be in place is her emotions. When she's wrapped up in passion or love or confidence, she seems to take ownership over herself and the curse. This has led some to believe that the curse might not just literally make the victim older, but rather reflects what one thinks about themselves onto oneself. It manifests one's cognition. The main character, Sophie, felt slow and quashed. She was the oldest of her siblings, so she was left to shovel most of the responsibility. Through obligation, she was chained in a state where her feet would drag, her skin would sag, and she'd be mostly incapable of real growth or progress. She felt old. She essentially had the relationship with all the things she had been telling herself made real by the curse. She literally had to face her feelings. She had to waltz with the mistake of underestimating, second-guessing, and shortchanging her own life. And this kind of dramatic irony makes me fucking scream. What lies are you still telling yourself? What prison have you kept yourself in, and what mistakes are you waltzing with? This video is about how we connect with our own experiences, what we learn, what we refuse to learn, and where it can be seen in our media, because I'm a nerd and I like to talk about cartoons and stuff. I want to see what I can unpack. This is Steven Universe, and the ongoing theme of trauma is baked into the identity of this cartoon. And the episode of Steven Universe that explores this most romantically is my favourite episode of the entire show. I'm about to set the scene for the entirety of Steven Universe and Steven Universe Future, so if you're wanting to avoid spoilers, skip to this timestamp, but in any case, here's what is at play. This is Steven, and this is Steven's alien gemstone mother, Rose Quartz. This race is literally sentient gemstones. Rose was previously one of the leading matriarchs in a race of space colonizers. She was once this character, Pink Diamond. The aforementioned colonizers would extend their reach to countless corners of the universe in order to subvert ecosystems, steal resources, and facilitate the expansion of their grand empire. Essentially, they would destroy planets so that they could grow bigger. Steven's mother was tasked with colonizing Earth. But after experiencing human culture and falling in love with an actual human, Steven's dad, Greg Universe, she decides to fight against her Imperial sisters and stop the destructive expansion of her own kind. And all of the main characters in the show are in the throes of picking up the pieces and compartmentalizing the damage done by this grand colonization, and more particularly, the damage done by Rose's previous involvement in and subsequent betrayal of that empire. Rose is looked up to by many characters in the show. This character Pearl was, and to a degree still is, in love with them. The issue with this though is that Rose has not always been a force for good, for one, and she's dead, she's gone, for two. Rose is a product of the colonial kingdom she once shared rule over, and glimpses of her history reveal a much more self-interested, immature, and at times volatile character. In the Steven Universe Future episode, Volleyball, we focus on two characters who were both in service to Rose. Pearl and Volleyball. Yeah, they're gonna have weird names, it's Steven Universe.
Volleyball?
At this point in the story, Pearl has already had to make her peace with her affections and assumptions about Rose, but she bumps into one living victim of the woman she spent so much time adoring. Volleyball is a cracked Pearl, and this crack is a remnant of the abuses of Rose Quartz. In the writing anthology Looking Queer, Kenny Fries writes,
"What is a scar if not the memory of a once open wound?"
Volleyball carries with her a reminder of the trauma dealt to her at the hands of another. But from the way that she talks, you can tell that she's not fully come to understand what this trauma means for her. She doesn't know how she's meant to feel about the person who hurt her. She's not really done healing.
She didn't mean to hurt me. I just happened to be standing too close to her that time, and
Pearl and Volleyball go back and forth, with Pearl clearly being upset about having her high opinions of Rose challenged by the scars left on Volleyball. Later in the episode, everything comes to a head, and they are forced to address their trauma.
I was badly hurt. How did you stop hurting? I didn't.
The scene never really left me. The conversation of accepting the fact that we will always carry a little part of our trauma is a hurtful but important concept to make peace with. I think modern storytelling is developing. We're getting more and more depictions of mental health, trauma, and all of the associated consequences. And what I adore so much about this episode is what it has to say about the way we love, the way we trust, and the way we learn to be better after that trust is broken. These two share a solidarity over their parallel experiences, which I think in itself is an appropriate echo of our current culture around victims becoming support networks for other victims. If there was a point to this story, it would be to bolster the idea that we are more than just a catalogue of our trauma. Volleyball needed the perspective of Pearl to really understand it, but even though we really are just products of abuses, our mistakes, and our upset, look at what strong, beautiful, glimmering products we can be. It is unfortunately the case that we are incredibly flawed creatures. And when you think or feel a particular way, you'll find yourself falling for the same pitfalls over and over. If you're stuck in the same kind of relationships, the same damaging ways of thinking, and ultimately the same bad habits that you already identified in yourself years earlier, you may be waltzing with the same mistake. The Good Place is a story about reflection and second chances. The main characters are dead, and we get to find out about them in their next phase of existence. The Good Place. The afterlife. The main twist of the show is that the good place they think they are in is actually the bad place. They are being tortured, forced to live under circumstances that cause them to repeat the same human errors they performed on Earth over and over again in the afterlife. In the waking world, these characters led problematic lives. Chidi was indecisive to the point of comedy.
I'm Chidi Anagonye. I would like to unequivocally order the pumpkin soup.
You kind of want to change your order.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking.
My whole life has been a torture chamber of indecision.
Tahani was prideful, measuring every action taken based on how much social currency it would pay her.
I was a model, a museum curator, an it girl, and I was Baz Luhrmann's muse for a while. That was quite fun.
And Eleanor was just a shitty fucking person.
Here, do you have a second to talk about the environment?
Do you have a second to eat my farts?
You need me to lie to old people and scare them into buying fake allergy medicine. I get it, man.
Cold, abrasive, and selfish all the way up until the moment that she died. Jason was there as well.
You're basically like a hot genius teacher who sometimes has sex with me. You're a student. That used to happen a lot at Leonard Skinner High School.
Then, after literally being swatted out of life where they stood, the afterlife offers no absolution, no comfort, and no rehabilitation. They are basically surrounded by suspiciously convenient enablers, opportunities to cycle through the same shitty behavior that left them scorned and shallow. Even in heaven, they woke up anxious, self-absorbed, and suffering for it. What I'm describing is primarily just the plot of the first season. As the story is given room to develop, so too are the characters. Redemption, betterment, and second chances will be explored in the show, but the writing does make it clear, even though they are clearly products of their environment, they are ultimately their own worst enemies. Stilted, underloved, and undereducated in some capacities, but in the end, all the way up until the moment they died, they were still accountable for their own sins and still the owners of their own problems. BoJack Horseman is one of the most important pieces of media ever made, and we are going to talk about it. Adult animation is a developing medium, with people coming to new conclusions about the kind of stories they want to tell. Ew. BoJack Horseman asks the question, how low can one man go? The titular character, BoJack Horseman, is a wealthy celebrity. After starring in a very popular TV show in the 90s, the royalties have now left him minted, but depressed and jaded. Now, in his mid-50s, he looks to more and more avenues of life to try and fill the hole in his chest that deepens every season. The time he spends on screen is more often than not him either relapsing on his own trauma or him literally traumatizing others. An alcoholic male with an inflated ego in a position of high regard and fame makes for a person who can hurt many. His character arc will see him sabotage the happiness of those around him, endanger minors and family alike, and even accidentally kill a very close and vulnerable friend by enabling their drug abuse. The story of BoJack is so strong because it rarely pulls punches. When the main character messes up, trust is shattered, boundaries get re-established, and people's lives change to pick up the pieces. You will see his apologies get refused, people will cut him out entirely, and he almost never ends up on top. Much like real life, particularly in the later seasons, he rarely gets free passes. He has to make the most of whatever and whoever he hasn't steamrolled with his mistakes. In the final episode, in the final scene of the entire show, him and Diane remark the following.
Life's a bitch and then you die, right?
Sometimes. Sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living.
Yeah.
But it's a nice night, huh?
Yeah. This is nice.
I think the curse of being human is that we really are capable of the greatest good and the deepest evil simultaneously. At any point, we are all just a few good choices or bad ideas away from being like a beloved facilitator or an infamous criminal. And it's unfortunately the case that a lot of development can only happen retrospectively. When we fuck up, we can't have known any better. A insanely difficult but also unfortunately really, really fucking real message that I think BoJack shows us is that sometimes you will mess up and everything will get worse. I don't think the show ever encourages people to give up, more so just do the best you can with the hand you are dealt. Even if you wake up tomorrow at your very lowest point, the most you can do is just try to be better the very next day. This video exists because of a curse. As I stated in a previous video, I explained that I like language. I literally enjoy the practice of finding new ways to explain things. It's a bit of a quirk that I share with one of my close friends, and it's great if you like writing, but the habit does have a caveat. I feel like I've spun lip service on my own trauma in every possible way. I've cracked the shell on like every difficult conversation. I've like TED talked myself through my own personal history long enough to write a thesis on it. But despite all of that, I seldom feel like I'm getting any better. I feel stuck. I'm literally lying awake thinking of the same problems, the same people, the blood they left in my bed, and the hair that's still in my shower. I was hoping that I could look at the characters from all of these shows that I've brought up and pretend I've got something to learn. A cautionary tale, a musing of methodology, some vague answer to the question, what the fuck do I do now? Where do I even go from here? What does getting better even look like? The one true commonality in all of your problems is you. This is not to point fingers, you are not necessarily the cause of all of your issues, but you're like the vehicle, you're the recipient, the fucking dance partner. And if you, like me, think that you are waltzing with your mistakes, that you're swept in a spin that seems unending, then the most I can offer you is some solidarity. I want to tell you that you're not alone, but this is a platitude. It's a cliche often offered when there's little else of value left to say. I want to say things like, try your best, but why would you have been doing any less? I want to tell you to take your time, but time is exactly what's being taken here. It's taking time to feel better, it's taking time to grow. Time is like the only currency that's here. I'm genuinely scared that I might not have anything of value to say. It might be a mistake to think that the waltz ever really stops. If we're meant to be learning every day, then maybe we never really leave our mistakes behind. Not all of them, at least. Maybe you just get better at dancing. I did my best to notice when the call came down the line. Up to the platform of surrender, I was brought, but I was kind. And sometimes I get nervous when I see an open door. Close your eyes, clear your heart. Cut the cord. Are we human? Or are we dancer? My sign is vital. My hands are cold. And I'm on my knees looking for the answer. Are we human? Or are we dancer? Are we human? Or are we dancer?